to Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano, in partnership with Bio Australia.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 83 of Lifestyle Pirates with me, Big J, and him,
Bongness of Jorno's Adriano.
There we go, mate. Welcome. Happy New Year, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
It's been a while.
It's been well. You've been a busy boy.
Yeah,
You don't prioritise me anymore. You prioritise work, but that's okay. That's another relationship.
Got to grind, mate. Got to grind.
Got to grind. This is going to be an epic show. We are filming here on a Sunday morning here before a 5-hour set that I can't wait to see with a good friend of the show, Factor B, Brendan Blatt. Mate, welcome.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Mate.
Nice to be here. Nice to be in some sunshine for a change. So,
super excited to have you on the show, mate.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
This has been a few years in the making, mainly because you live on the other side of the world, and whenever you come over here, you are flying around like a nutter.
Yes.
So I do really, really appreciate the time, mate.
My pleasure.
It's been good to follow the journey. That we first connected, I think, back in Feb 2016 when you played at Digital Therapy, which was a night that I ran.
Yeah.
Actually alongside Adriano, a.k.a. Elucidus.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, Matt Bowdidge, who we mentioned earlier. But, mate, there's a few things that have changed since then. I mean, you're not Aussie bound anymore. You live in Amsterdam. Like, what's been going on?
No, the roots are still here, but moved to Amsterdam in 2017. I think the end of 2016 or midway through, I started to have a little bit of traction with the music. I recall actually playing the show with you. I had maybe Stratos Galaxius and maybe a couple other tracks in the works that were starting to get traction from some of the big guys.
Yeah.
And I had to make a call whether I stayed in the corporate world, the radio game in Melbourne, which was going really well for me. Like, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And everything was...
We'll let you know, mate, because you're basically on radio.
But I really enjoyed it. And, I was on a pretty good trajectory. Then I headed over to ADE 2016, and I was playing a show with Rich Solarstone for Pure Trance and that, and went over there with Ellie at the time, and we were like, okay, let's check out how this all works and see if there's any traction with the music, because I was playing the closing set, actually, at the Pure Trance show, and I'm like, oh, well, if a few people hang around, then it should be good. And the place was absolutely rammed. There was people wearing Factor B shirts, and
Nice.
I remember turning to Ellie and saying, shit, should we maybe think about making a move over here? And she's like, oh, well, we'd have to change a lot, and you've got this, and I'm working for Virgin, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I've got an Irish passport, so we can leave whenever we want. Fast forward a few months, blah, blah, blah. We decided to make the call on it, and I quit my job, left in April 2017, and made a new home in Amsterdam. Yeah, and been there pretty much ever since.
Yeah. I mean, just to unpack the blah, blah, blah a little bit, because, I mean, look, we're obviously here in 2024, but that's a
25, mate.
25, sorry. Thanks, buddy. Yeah. Happy New Year.
Way to date the podcast already, bro.
That's a ballsy move, right? To leave home, leave a regular income, move to the other side of the world, but pursue like a real dream and obviously a passion. Like, I want to ask kind of where music comes from for you and all that. But what were some of the things you and Ellie had to consider in that? Because it's a big move.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was quite an interesting little period, actually. So I was working in radio for the Oz Stereo Network. So you'd know them up here as Today FM and down there it's Triple M and Fox and all that. And things were going really well for me. I was actually nominated to be nominated for like the direct sales rep of the year for the whole country in I think it was October or something, just before I left to go over to ADE. So things were going very, very well. Then when we came back from ADE and we sort of had the discussion, should we do this or that and should we move over? I actually won it. So I was at the top of the tree, which was an amazing feeling. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe this is the sign because I've done it and I've made it to this point. Maybe there's something more for me now to sort of move on. But yeah, to pick up and leave based on, a whim of just wanting to chase a passion and just wanting to explore this thing that I'd been in love with for most of my life was it was pretty simple in a sense of wanting to pursue it, but behind the scenes, it's like, yeah, you literally have to move overseas. You have to give up your job, give up the 8 years of building up your client bases and your relationships and all that type of stuff. Ellie was a couple of years in working for Virgin as a hostess. She was doing really well. But just the lure of living in Europe and the Irish passport was just a golden ticket because she could come over with me as a partner and she didn't have to worry about all the visa stuff and that. So, yeah, it was definitely a huge shift, but just the idea of moving over and living in a new country and just you know, reinvigorating your life. I think I was 30 at the time. Was the perfect time for me to do it. I wanted something new. I wanted something fresh. And the corporate world, as good as it was to me in a sense, it was still working for the man in many ways. Yeah. Whereas I had an opportunity to go and, you know, essentially as an artist and a DJ, your job is to fly around the world making people happy. And that's a bit different to selling radio ads and that. You still help people with that, but the proposition was a lot different and you get to work for yourself. And I always figured if it didn't work out, I could always come home and you know, start again or whatever. But yeah, I considered all those things. And then, yeah, once I went over there, it was just like all guns blazing from there.
Yeah. So as soon as you touched down, it was full throttle?
Yeah.
How was that?
Got into Amsterdam, tough to find a rental place there, all that type of thing, but I had a few mates on the ground there which sort of helped the whole process. Next minute it was like, you know, doing shows in London and all around the place, $300 here, $300 there. So I was just leaking money for the first year and a half, but I'd sort of planned for that. But I knew also I had a little nest egg that I'd built up savings-wise here. So I sort of went into the process over there a little different to what I imagine most musicians would. Young musicians and people coming into the industry, it's about like they're trying to make a living for themselves as much as a career. And you can't make a living if you can't pay your rent.
Yep.
You can't make music if you're under stress, all these things. So I created this sort of environment where everything was just a bonus. That's the way I viewed it. I went over there and I'm like, I'm in Amsterdam. This place is unbelievable. Culture, I'm close to all these other places in Europe. I'm close to the heartbeat of music and all these things. And the next minute I find myself, you know, working day in, day out, treating it like a job, like the radio industry. Up in the morning, regime, gym at lunchtime, back, working, almost burning myself out. But I figured that's what I needed to do to, you know, elevate myself as like a young artist. And then next minute, because I'm in Amsterdam, I'm taking opportunities to go in and be in there with Armin and do like the ASOT shows and all this stuff. And then slowly. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I had the mental and financial freedom, at least for the first year and a bit, to be able to just like, if the track wasn't resonating with me after, you know, 3 or 4 sessions or a few days, scrapped it, went to a new one. Whereas even these days I talk to artists and they're like, I just got to keep the music coming, you know, you got to stay relevant, got to stay in the charts, got to have your releases going. And I think maybe conversation for later, that's where I feel the music industry today is starting to, you know, really have its downfall. It's like people are just treating it as a commodity more than a, you know, art or a work of art, right? And so
Spotify's a big reason for that.
Exactly right. And it's so accessible. So I sort of treat it as in, if I can just keep this run that I had going with the tunes and having the support of Armin and John O'Callaghan and Brian and all these guys who are playing my stuff, and Fadi as well, Future Sound of Egypt, I'm like, well, maybe I'll make a shot at this. And then luckily enough, the next 3 or 4 tracks, back then Beatport was maybe a little bit more prevalent, but I had about 3 or 4 number 1 singles in a row, which really sort of elevated me. And the trance scene was definitely at a point where it was looking for some freshness. And I was sort of positioned there, Irish passport, so I could go to all the countries, I could do whatever I needed to do, no red tape. And it all just started to pay itself off over the coming year and a half, 2 years. And then we sort of made the decision a few years in to be like, all right, well, we're here now, we're settled, we've got a place. Don't really care about going back into the radio world in Australia. Let's plant here and go for it.
Nice. Before we jump into some of the names that you mentioned and that part of the journey, I want to take a step back. Like, what got you into music? Like, what does music mean to you? And I guess, what got you into trance as well? I think some people go different ways. They go, I don't know, we'll find your personal journey. But for me, I went a kind of I went like happy hardcore, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, and then Born Slippy Underworld, and then my life changed to like electronic music. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, my poor mum taking me to school in the morning. Fair play to her. But so I guess, what was your journey into music? Were you surrounded by it as kids, or because your stuff is fully like brain teasing and some of the breakdowns and things, which again we'll talk about. Did I say that right?
Sure. Yeah. It's your journey, mate.
Thanks, man. What were some of the things that got you into it? And then what was that trance tune?
Yeah. Okay, so I grew up in a cliche, very musical family, but not in a sense of like playing instruments, except for my older brother. He was in a band when he was quite young and he was playing drums, but my mum and dad were just the party central at our place. So growing up when we were young, I'm in bed at 2:00 in the morning with the bed shaking because they're pumping. Oh, geez, maybe my sister Lucy can help me out with some of the music here, but everything from Led Zeppelin to REM to U2 to B.B. King to Elton John and to like just the full spectrum, nice. Like everything. And I would hear these tracks, Eric Clapton tracks and all this stuff with these beautiful breakdowns like Layla and all this stuff, these beautiful orchestral sort of breakdown parts and stuff. And I just, Elton John as well, Funeral for a Friend, which is a great song that my mum loves or loved, bless her. And you just listen to that track and you can, if you imagine parts of that as a trance track, like it just works so well. So anyway, I was hearing all these tracks, and then as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more interested in like how they're done. And then my brother's in a band, and there's a drum kit in the backyard. Then all the guitarists are coming over, and I'm just starting to learn more and more about it. And then a good buddy of mine, Scotty Oliver, his older brothers were in London in the late 90s, early 2000s during the big boom of trance and everyone buying decks and having house parties and all that stuff. And they returned back somewhere in the early 2000s, and we were getting influence from them from some of the Gatecrasher CDs and some of the early global underground albums.
What's your favourite? Wet, Red, Black?
Wet, for sure.
I actually like Disc 2 Discotheque.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, one of my favourite ones. Yeah. The almond mix of L'Esperanza on there blew my mind. But that was a bit further down the track. So anyway, I was getting into that sort of stuff a bit. But I was listening to, I got into heavy metal a lot. So I loved Metallica and all that. And I was recording a Metallica live concert. I think it was on Kiss FM or something. And I had my tape recorder going because Dad was great. He knew we all loved music. So I had big speakers in my room. I had cassette players. I had CD players, all this crazy shit. And I was recording this Metallica live show, and at the end it sort of finished, but I wasn't home for it. I just set the recording and it just recorded the next show, and some weasel guy came on and go, "Hey guys, how you going this week? We got this and this dance tracks, blah blah blah," and he opens up with the Lange mix of DJ Sacken and Braveheart. Oh, Protect Your Mind.
Yeah, I know exactly where you are. Yeah, what an emotional journey.
Like, what the fuck is this? I honestly was just you talk about that moment for you, that was the moment for me. When I heard that track, I'm like, how can something like that be something like this? How can it be so beautiful and orchestral? And then these, I didn't even know what they were called at the time, but these synths come in and then the bass line and the kick and everything. I'm just like, it's like heavy metal, but it's electronic and it's like energy and it's building and it's emotional. It's all these things that I knew and loved, but in this completely new way. And that was the moment that it really shifted. And then I started, and then that sort of moved on, as I was saying. I had a little bit of influence from my mate Scotty's older brothers, and then they had turntables out the back of their place, and we learned about the vinyls and all this stuff. Then we started getting the Trance Nation CDs, the Gatecrasher CDs. But it was actually the global underground stuff that me and my mates got into very early. So Okie, New York, Sasha, Ibiza. Okie, New York for me is like, that's how I tell if a girl's right for me. I play her the Okie New York Disc 2, and if she scrunches her face up, I just push her out the car door as we're driving.
Mate, pull out the vinyl, then you know whether she's right or not.
Yeah, exactly. So that stuff. And when I listen back to that stuff now, I actually think like, what the fuck? Like, I was like 15 or 16 listening to this music, which was just super high IQ electronic music. And it just shaped my whole understanding of how it all works, and like just the mystery behind the tracks and the DJs and all this stuff. I just loved it. And as that evolved, I think that's when like the Transnation CDs and all that sort of stuff started to take a little bit more of a hold. The Gatecrasher CDs.
Is that the one with Ferry Corsten? The Ministry
yeah, he opens up with Robert Miles' Children into Out of the Blue, and there's some other ones on there. And then once I heard that stuff, I was like, put a fork in me. Like that's it. Like that's the stuff that I love.
Just as an FYI, System F Out of the Blue is my all-time favourite.
Really?
Track.
That's your track, huh?
Belter.
So there's 2 stories on that. One involves you.
Yeah.
But I first heard him play it out at
Turnmills.
Turnmills. I actually played there the night before I got married.
Yeah?
Yeah. So we went to Turnmills and Ferry Corsten played System F Out of the Blue and I just lost it.
Yeah.
I did.
You wept.
I didn't know what to do with myself because I think all those things that you've just kind of described, when you're there, it's another one.
Yeah.
And then when you played last year Civic Underground, you dropped the kind of violin edit.
Yeah.
And I just melted.
Yeah, yeah. I've been playing that a lot of like that version. No one knows it. So I saw him play that for the first time. I was in Rotterdam for his show. It was called Masquerade.
Yeah.
And I was over there. I was living in London at the time because I moved to London when I was 19 for a few years because I was just chasing the dream. I just wanted to go over there and play and see what it was all about. And I went to Rotterdam to see his show Masquerade, and he played it, and they had like the full violins and all the stuff there, and it was just broke down into that, and then it just, how it just whooshes up into the breakdown. I just turned into a puddle. I don't know if I pissed myself. I don't know if I actually physically turned into a puddle. I was like, how could that happen? And I just thought to myself, that is just the most unbelievable version of this thing. And so I've been playing it a little bit of late, actually.
So was he a big influence? So who was your influence? I guess before you started to get behind the turntables, was he an influence or was it Armin? Who was that?
Definitely. Well, I think Oki was sort of my first influence because he was sort of the crossover between, he was playing some of those tracks in some of his sets, like the what's the one he was doing with Pete Tong, the Essential Mix tour and stuff. He was starting to drop a couple of those tracks in there, here and there. And then as I started to get into the Gatecrasher stuff, you started to recognise the tracks that were standing out. So I think early on for me, it was definitely your Ferry Corstens and your Armin van Buren's because they really had that sound, like that Dutch sound really nailed. And then you obviously go to like your Goyella, so that's like still Ferry. And then it evolved as Anjuna started to sort of come into the play. That's when I started really, or before that still, there was Airbase, then there was Nitrous Oxide, then there was Super 8 and Tab. Like the list just goes on. Like there was just so many. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few people, but
it's very easy to.
There was just so many. But I just love that sound.
Paul Van Dyke,
Paul Van Dyke, all these guys. Like I just love that sound. And then as they all started to come to Australia for the shows, that's when I started to pick up on more of the music and understand it more. And back then it was still a bit of a mystery, like you'd have to get it on vinyl, mostly, right? If you were DJing and stuff. So you'd hear the tracks on the Essential Mixes or whatever, and you'd look them up on the internet then, or try to get them on Napster or whatever it was.
LimeWire.
Yeah, exactly. Shit, there was one other as well.
Just got a virus saying that.
Yeah, I know. Far out. Yeah, downloaded a track and all. Just got a pair of titties on there. I was like, oh, sorry, Mum.
I'll take it.
I was downloading trance. I swear to God. She's like, fucking hell.
I mean, I had the same experience.
Yep. So it just evolved from there, and then I started to carve out what I loved, and I really loved those big arpeggiated, big monster riffs, and that fundamentally for me was Ferry Corsten. He was and still is the king of that sound. And I've been so fortunate enough to get to know him and tour with him a bit, and I'm still in awe of the guy when I'm around him. He's such a great character, but I just look at him, I'm just like, the amount of hours I listened to his music, before I got to meet him was actually quite crazy.
He's starting to go back to that original sound as well.
Yeah, I had a conversation with him on a plane on the way back from Newcastle late last year. He was actually showing me the track that he released with Super Strings. Yeah. And as soon as he played it, he'll love this. So I'm just full, like we joke sometimes I'm like on the spectrum of the trance scene because like I'm just like an encyclopedia of all these things because I just listened to it for so many years. And as soon as he played it for me, I went, It sounds like your remix of Matt Darey, Liberation.
Oh, bro, what a track.
And he goes, yeah, it's the same stems.
No way.
Yeah, so that track, Super Strings, is the stems from the Matt Darey track. And if you listen to it closely, he's changed some stuff around and he's updated it. But I said it to him, this is Liberation. He turned to me, he goes, yeah.
When you say tracks like that, old tracks, do you straight away think of what the record looked like?
A little bit, yeah.
Because back then, when you're looking for tracks, right, you're shuffling through your record box. You pull up the sleeve. You're like, you know what the sleeve looks like. Yeah. And now it's like, fuck. Now I can't even remember the name of a track. Like,
no, 100%. Yeah, 100%. But he's. I mean, that sound now is like it's. Everything goes in waves. But like we're talking a little bit about it before. Everything goes in waves, and people, I think, now are wanting a bit more connection with their music. Yeah. And that's a big part of what's going on with this album I'm doing, or done. It's, I feel like, and we were talking earlier before about digital versus vinyl and why vinyl's made such a big comeback. I feel like fashion, people, everything's cool for a bit. And then it's cool to like something else. Yeah, of course. And it was cool to have vinyl and all these things for a while. And then the digital was like, oh my God, this is so much better. I can finish a track today and play it tomorrow. And that's still relevant. But now it's like, oh, you got that on vinyl. Oh, you got that on vinyl. Oh, you got the Prodigy
That's my
Fat of the
catchphrase.
Land on vinyl. Holy shit, And it's like, yeah. And like back in the day, it's like, everyone
That's
had
how
it.
you got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how you got it.
How you got it. So now I feel like there's this feeling of people wanting a little bit more connection to the music because, like you said, Spotify's just flick next, algorithm, 3-minute mixes.
Yeah.
How do you tell a fucking story in 3 minutes, especially in trance?
Yeah, your breakdowns are longer than that. Yeah.
100%.
I call you're like the shoulder wrecking DJ. Yeah. Because every time, man, I played one of your tracks at my last gig, and I'm like, fuck, man, my shoulders are starting to hurt now, bro. For the breakdown, it was like 93 minutes. I was like, far out, mate. I'm going to need some injections after this one.
You know what got
the
me?
shoulder wrecking DJ, mate. Factor B, we got it here.
At a State of Trance last year, I won't name the DJ that said this to me. He comes up and he goes, mate, I get it now. And I go, oh, here we go. He's going to give me a pat on the back here. And he goes, I get the long breakdowns now. And I go, yeah, like, I put a lot in them. He goes, you let the crowd rest because they're getting older. And then when it drops in, then they go wild. I get it. Because if they're jumping around all night, you're going to tire them out. So you just give them a rest for 3 minutes and then they go wild. Then you give them another rest for 3 minutes. And I was like, he's actually kind of right as well.
I was like, man, he's not fucking wrong there.
I didn't know I was doing that, but I am.
Subconsciously.
So all my fans out there, I'm giving you a rest, all right? That's why I make them so long.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, mate, your breakdowns are monumental, mate. Honestly, being a music producer myself as well, how you can keep someone engaged and the elevations and the levels that you put onto it as the breakdown progresses. Yep. For me, it's fucking emotional as. Yep. I absolutely love it. It touches me on a chemical level on my brain more than anything else, right? So, in the risk of getting a bit nerdy here, how do you sort of build a breakdown? And not only that, how do you build the track as well? Do you start from the breakdown, write all your chords and everything, and then work outwards like that, or how do you do it?
I never really had a system for it. I still kind of don't really have a system for it. I think I become attached to a riff or a sound or an idea. Without going too just
use any words.
Philosophical.
Got
it. I've heard people talking about where do your thoughts come from? Where does ideas come from? Do they get sent to you from some other place? Whatever? I don't know. Sometimes I just get these. I hear something and an idea just sort of comes into my head. So I'll jump in the studio and I'll write the riff out or something, and then based on the riff alone, I'll then create around it. That could be a bass line. I might have an idea for a bass line using like a bass, like an actual bass guitar or something, and I'll write it out, and then I'll be like, what would work with this or whatever. So I don't really have like a full blown structure, but it always revolves around the riff has to be standing the test of time. So when I go back in for session 2, 3, 4, if I'm not feeling that and getting excited about playing it out and like pretty much getting goosebumps about it, I scrap it. And it's a hard way to work because, sometimes one decision can change the whole course of the track, sometimes two. But if you make one decision somewhere along the line of producing a track that's not right, then the way I see it is the foundation's broken. So if you've got the foundation and then the next decision is okay but not great, well then the next decision after that can only be based off the decision you made before. So if you don't make the best decision each time, slowly but surely the track starts to deteriorate. So for me, I make sure that the riff itself is non-negotiable. Then I make sure the sound of the riff is non-negotiable, and then everything else around that is finding the ideas that fit that, because I know that riff is going to work. And then it might be I'll use a trance pad to back it up, and then I'll listen to it the next day and go, nah, maybe it doesn't work, change it to some violins or something else like that. but I know that riff will work. So it's about experimenting and coming around. Now I hear a lot of guys say, oh, I write a track in a day and this and that, and I'm sure they do. I'll take weeks, months before I finish a track. Cold Blue is the same, because I feel like when you're making, you kindly were saying about the breakdowns, it's like you don't just go in and write them.
No, absolutely
and
not.
I'm such a fucking weirdo. Like I'll write the track and I'll write, version 1, and then I'll listen to it like in bed or when I'm going for a run or whatever. And I'll listen to it over and over and over, and then I'll write notes down. I know a lot of artists do this, and I'll write notes down. And then I'll go back into the studio and I'll start adding those notes in. I'll try this little riff here, I'll try a violin there, or use this idea you had in this other track from earlier.
Voice recorder.
Yeah, it's like you new ideas come as you listen to it. So for me, it's a longer process. And I think that's what helps me make the breakdowns and those things sound very unique to my style, because it's not just like, oh, that's good enough, let's go to the next thing. It's like, if I'm not getting that goosebumpy type feel, I either strip it back again or I scrap it.
Yeah.
So it's quite a long process, but one that's been, I think, probably the biggest asset in terms of what my music sounds like in a unique sense, because you never go in trying to sound like anyone else, but you always want to sound true to yourself. And I think that just naturally comes out based on the amount of time that I spend. And, I work with guys like Lossley, who's an absolute machine in the studio, but he's like, I got an hour and then my creative stuff is done. I've done some collabs with him and doing some with him at the moment. He sends me these ideas that are just off the scale. So amazing. And he's like, you spend 2 hours trying to tweak a hi-hat, I write the idea out, and then he just knows that I'll turn it into whatever it's going to blow up into in terms of the sound. But some people are good at writing the ideas. Some people are better at having the patience to sit there and just sort of flesh it out. And I think that's probably where my strength is.
So tell me, after saying all that, why do you think music today is all very similar? Now, I know obviously people need to stick to a genre and everything else like that, but why does it all sound the same?
There's a few rabbit holes we could go down here, in my opinion. But one of the sad things that I came to learn when I got deeper into the industry and got to know the other artists and stuff is the majority of artists in trance are ghost produced. Not half, not some, the majority. The majority of guys and girls.
So I guess for people that don't know what that means, what does that mean?
It means that you don't exactly know how much they're involved in the track, because they'll always say that they're involved in some way, shape or form, and I'm sure they are. But many artists will pay a highly skilled producer or engineer to either take an idea or just write a track from scratch for them and say, how do you like this? And for me, that is, I don't have anything against people doing that, but it's to a point where you say, why do you think things sound the same? It's because the same people are making everyone's tracks. And it's like this dirty little secret that no one talks about. And it's like, why not? Why not? And
so just to condense that, so I could say to Adriano or you, make a track under Big J.
Yeah. You'd be better off asking him, man.
Sounds like he put more effort into it.
Yeah, his tracks are a lot better than mine, bro.
But I could say, make a track under Big J. I would call it Big J, whatever. Yeah. But you've done the work. I might say, hey, well, actually, I wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about, but I might say, hey, put some seasoning here and whatever.
Yeah.
But effectively, you've done it.
Or you'll give me a brief, hey, I love Ferry Corson. Make a tune that sounds like him. And then it might be up to me. And then you'll say, oh, can you do... And you'll give me some reference tracks and stuff like that. And look, ghost producing and all of that's been going on forever, since the dawn of music.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not like this new thing. However...
But that's not the same as like Pharrell producing for like Madonna or Justin Timberlake producing for...
However, this is the thing. Electronic music nowadays... You can go on YouTube and learn how to make music.
Exactly.
You can,
so easy.
Giuseppe Ottaviani has got a 9-hour tutorial course which tells you, he's one of the best producers on the planet, and he just tells you everything. So get out there and learn how to make it. If you're passionate about it, shut up, stop paying someone else to go and do it, go and do it yourself and feel like the journey and enjoy it. And
That's the thing. Everyone
We're
wants
going off topic,
notoriety, but nobody wants to put in the effort.
No, exactly. Everyone wants the notoriety, and they don't want to put in the effort, which is, I kind of get that to a point, but like, again, going down another rabbit hole, it's like social media, and after COVID, DJing became cool, and influencers are getting behind it and all that stuff. And none of them know what they're doing, so they pay people to make music for them. And to be honest, there's smart marketers out there that go and grab a hold of these, good-looking guys and girls and say, hey, we can market you. Don't worry, we've got all the tools and the assets to make the music for you. You just look pretty and do really well on the socials, and we'll do everything else for you. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's business. It's whatever. But do you want to know why the music sounds the same? It's because, it's the same people generally behind it. More in trance, because trance is a much more niche genre. But, yeah, I find that it's... once you sort of wrap your head around that a little bit and you understand who the producers and who aren't, it's, like I was saying at the start, it was a little bit shocking for me because I found out some of my favourite artists were ghost produced. Oh, really? And it really rattled me. I was like, all these years that I've spent coming to your shows, all these vinyls that I've bought of yours, all these moments I've spent sitting on a couch at an after party telling you, oh, this guy's off the charts, you got to hear this track. And he never made a goddamn thing,
That's a rip.
He never made a goddamn thing. Yeah. And that really cut me inside, because I valued my opinion on the music, and I was advertising, or I don't know what the word is, but like advocating for this artist. Like, this guy's unreal. Like, how did he make that? Like, it's so beautiful and all this stuff. And then the worst part was, I don't know, it was a soft landing, because I found out that one of my favourite artists was actually ghost produced by one of my other favourite artists.
It was like, it makes sense.
So I was kind of like, you say, okay, you're right. And I've actually had conversations with these guys. So Stoneface and Terminal actually did a lot of producing for a lot of artists in the early 2000s. And I've had great conversations with them over a few beers about who they did and who they worked with and all this stuff. And I found it fascinating. But fundamentally, it was, it upset me because, maybe it doesn't matter to some people. Maybe it matters more to me. You're right. How important is my opinion in the scheme of things? Maybe not that important. But one thing that is important to me is I'm passionate about music, and I'm passionate about trance. And if you make music, then you deserve all the accolades and all the credit, and you deserve people to know that that's your story and that's your music. If you pay someone else to make your music and you don't tell anyone about it, what are you?
So you don't have to, by law...
No, because you make an agreement, because this is the other funny side of it. The ghost producers, most of the time, don't want to be connected to the track, because they don't want to have their name associated to whoever's doing it, because it's like, it's their business, so they don't want everyone knowing who they're making music for. And the producer doesn't want it, because they've got some sense of ego where they're like, I don't want to let people know that I don't make my own music. So we'll just make this handshake agreement. Here's the money. You stay off the credits. It's as simple as just like when you sign the track or submit the track, you just say, yeah, I made it. Now, Rich Solarstone and a few guys like that went through a little period where they're like asking the guys, did you make it? Because if someone else made it, we need to put them on the credits. But you could sit in front of me with a big J track and say, no, I made it. And I'll be like, well, prove it. And you'll be like, I don't need to prove it. Do you want the track or not? Yes or no? Yeah, I want it. Okay, fine. Sign it. Done. So it's as simple as that. And... maybe I'm just more passionate about this because I make the music and I love it, and I'm very passionate about trance. But I just find it just disappointing that, we're getting trance is getting dragged through the mud every now and again through, everything's sounding the same, everything's sounding this and that. And it's like, well, it's the same people making it, So they've only got so far. And also, as a ghost producer, even when you're doing a collab with someone, you don't even know sometimes if you're putting your absolute best into it, because it's a collab. Like, I've had times where I've been writing a remix and I'm like, far out, this is fucking good.
Yeah,
like this,
and you
this
don't want to remix
I haven't put the vocal over it, I haven't done anything yet, and I'm like, maybe I'll just I'll sneak this idea off. And so you have those moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't really sort of like, it's I don't know. I just feel like, as someone who's very passionate about the genre and wants to push the genre forward, when I hear people saying everything's sounding the same in trance or whatever, I'm like, well, go and listen to the artists that are making their own music that sound different, get behind them, support them, and they'll hopefully continue taking the genre forward.
So speaking about trance and the evolution of it, at the moment now, there seems to, you mentioned before how things to come swings and roundabouts, right? that come around. So at the moment now, it seems to be like Euro dances coming back in, that 90s sort of donk and 145 plus BPM.
Yeah.
Right? Why has that become so popular again? Because to me personally, mate, it's guilty pleasure. I fucking love it.
Yeah. It's great.
Absolutely love it. There's a few Aussie artists as well that are coming up that are, mate, killing it. Like Pretty Girl. There's that Melbourne DJ. She makes her own shit. She's moved overseas to UK now. Absolutely killing it. But that's that more fast 90s Euro dance.
The UK. The UK has always been sort of the heartbeat of dance music, predominantly from my experience. And it really blew up that donkey sort of sound in the last few years. And it just goes through phases. And then a lot of artists sort of chase that sound and go after it. But I would argue that donkey sound's on its back. That donk sound is on its back end now. Like it's sort of like the next sort of thing in, you know, then there's the melodic techno, then there's the donk. Now it's sort of the UK, all jokes aside, is actually starting to become quite trancey again, you know?
Yeah. I was wondering if that was going to happen.
A guy's just come out here he's quite big in the UK, Ben Hemsley. He's come out here, did a couple of shows out here. He's sort of like that sort of hard housey, techno-y type thing, but plays some sort of classic trancey stuff. You know, got a big up in the UK about being the next trance thing, and he's done a collab with Armin and a few things like that. And he's really attached to that younger generation, that sort of 18 to 25-year-olds. So naturally, if you ask me, it always comes back to melodies. You can only listen to the techno-y stuff for so long before you're like, you know, where's the melody? And I think that's...
Or a cheeky vocal.
And I think case closed when it comes to the likes of, say, Charlotte DeWitt. She's known for techno. But as techno blew up and she became basically, you know, techno's essentially become EDM, let's be honest, she was playing to these huge crowds. And you can't just play... non-melodic, I don't think she plays much vocal, but non-melodic stuff to these giant crowds, because the truth is, if you're playing to 20,000 people, there's 5,000 people that know your stuff, maybe, and 15,000 people are there for the festival, for the setup, for the other DJs, all this stuff. So eventually it gets to the point where your spectrum is so large of the crowd, you still got a job as a DJ. You still got to give everyone a great time. So very quickly you started hearing her playing all of the Mike Push anthems, you know, and she's from Belgium as well. So she was playing, you know, Universal Nation, all this stuff, and it's like, oh, she's playing trance anthems. I thought she was techno. It's like, well, no shit, because people want to hear something they know, they want to hear a melody, they want to hear something. And then the natural evolution of techno in the last few years has quite literally become EDM. Now you listen to like the big techno songs. They're just trance. It's just straight up trance.
Yeah.
Under the guise of techno. Yeah, same with melodic techno. It was just techno and now it's melodic. When the fuck did techno ever have melodies?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but now it's melodic techno because these guys don't want to call it trance, which is sad, but it is what it is. Yeah. And like I said, it always comes back to melody, because we're all passionate about music and we're passionate about trance. And other melodic stuff, but not everyone is. But they'll still buy tickets to a festival. You know, you might invite a few mates to come. Oh, come on, you'll enjoy it. Oh, I won't know any of the music, but when they play a famous vocal or something, they'll go, oh, fuck, I know this one. This is great. And that's the job of a DJ, to give everyone a good time. So as the music's gotten so much bigger and the techno scene has sort of blown up into that sort of EDM realm, they've had to play more melodies, and it's good for trance and it's good for, you know, the whole spectrum of it all. But it's interesting to watch from afar.
I mean, on that as well, I've just watched the Avicii documentary on Netflix, which is super interesting. But in the early days, they talk about his awareness of the audience, whether he was playing to 50 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people, about what tunes he would play, what he would play, and all of that. Is that a skill that you have to learn, or do you naturally have that? So, like, if you're playing a subculture arena, are you sitting there going, I know everybody here is here because it's under the subculture guys or a Future Sound of Egypt, or as if you play like a Civic Underground or Cafe Del Mar like you are today, are you sitting there going, it's a smaller crowd, they're all going to be there for me, or will there be still a little bit of the, you know, like at the Civic you drop like a Fred Again remix? Like, how do you prepare and go, well, how many people are here for Factor B stuff? Yeah. But then how many people are here because their mates drag them along, and I need to keep them entertained, but maybe educate them in terms of what I do and who I am?
Good question. It's somewhat complicated. If you're playing a festival like EDC, you know there's lots of different genres on there, so you kind of have to think about playing to a peripheral crowd as much as your own. So you keep it true to you always keep it true to you, but have a couple of, either make a bootleg or do something where you can kind of just branch off just to keep the audience like, oh, okay, I don't really know this stuff, but oh, I know that vocal and it sounds different, but it's cool. Then if you play a subculture, you know that they're all there for the likes of John and Brian, Giuseppe, myself, whatever. So you know they're all in the trance realm. So you still want to give them something that's very unique to you, but still something fresh, but also be aware that whoever's on before you or after you, there's going to be an energy change of some sense, mainly more who's on before you. So you need to make sure that you start at a certain level that matches, don't drop the energy. So you have to be aware of that, but also aware of what the crowd's doing a bit too, and have multiple routes. So if you've got like a 1 hour set, I tend to sort of have 3 to 4 routes that I can go during that set. So I'll take roughly sort of 30 tracks into the realm of where I can go and know quite easily where they go, 20 to 30. Also, if the set's being recorded and stuff like Dream State, all that stuff, you have to make sure it fits into that hour as well. So that's a whole nother like area where you have to be like, well, these are the tracks I want to play. Harmonically, these don't work, so I have to make sure this works. So it's always a little bit of a, like chess and checkers of moving things around. But ultimately, you always stay true to your sound, because you never know what fans you're going to pick up by them hearing your stuff. And if you're just playing stuff that they want to hear, great. You get the reaction, but they're going to forget you as soon as the next DJ cut comes on. The goal for me when I was younger on the dance floors, much like yourselves, was like, what the fuck was that track? Yeah. How do I find that track? Who is this guy again? Okay, what was that track? What was the vocal thing that he did? Jump on Spotify, find me, follow me, do all that. If I just play all the top 10 on Beatport, then it's just like, oh, I know that one. Oh, that's easy, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So there's a balance. And going a little deeper on that, there's also a huge thing that's not spoken about with artists and DJs these days, is about having the courage to play tracks that you know won't get a reaction because they've never heard it before. So for those big sets, Dream State, all this stuff, you go out there with a new track you finished the week before, you know no one's got a fucking clue what's going to happen in that track. So you have to have the courage to go out there and go, I know they're not going to go completely nuts to this track like they would a track they know of mine. But you know that by having the courage to do that, once they hear it, they're going to be like, what the fuck was that? They get the recorded set, and then the next time you go to that place, everyone's going nuts for that track, or the next city, or the next city, or the next city. And I feel like many DJs play it very safe, which is totally fine, but I feel like the artists are always the ones that are going in there with the courage to be like, I know you're here and you want to hear the stuff that you love, but I'm up here for a reason and I want to take you on my journey, and you're either going to jump on board or you're not, and that's totally fine. And you just have the courage to do what you want to do and tell your story. Do
you think also being a punter as well helps you on that? Like creating 100%. those sets?
100%. Yeah. I've still spent more time in front of the decks than I have behind them. I was fake IDing into clubs when I was 16, 17. Went and saw Paul Van Dyke. Had my first experience in there. Saw a koala on the dance floor.
Which I think
was
I was at the same party.
Yeah. Was that you? Jesus, I knew I'd seen you somewhere. I was just there, like the punter, just loving it. And I always, like when you talk about what I think about when I write my music, as weird as this sounds and self-absorbed, it's like, what would I love if I was out there watching me? What moment would I want to feel? What emotion would I want to feel with this track if I was on the dance floor? And I think that comes with a pedigree of 15 to 20 years of going to festivals, going to club shows, going to, flying up to here to Stereosonics and all these things, and just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Like I lived in London for 3 years. I went to Ibiza every summer. I went to Turnmills every second week. I went to Ministry of Sound. I saw just about every DJ there was. I think I saw Armin one year 9 times. And I saw what worked. I saw what didn't. And I loved it. So now when it comes to what I do, I've learned so much from what I've picked up as a punter and what I'd want to feel as a punter myself today. But I get the privilege of being behind the decks and taking them on the journey. So I think it definitely separates me a lot from perhaps other people who just get into electronic music, start making it, but never spend that time on the dance floor.
So you've done your time on the dance floor. So.
Yeah, I'm still there. I mean, there's still videos pop up all the time of me during my mates' sets and stuff. I sneak out there and punch a few frothies and dance around. You have to. It's what it's all about, you know. Like another rabbit hole we could go down is just people take DJing and music too seriously these days. You know, the DJs are like, oh, got to look a certain way, got to have a certain this, got to have a rider, got to have all these things. It's like, shut the fuck up,
Just
man.
play some tunes.
It's not brain surgery. You're going out there and you're just making people happy.
Yeah, exactly.
You're getting up there, and what a privilege it is to get up there and play music and make people happy. Get out there, you know, get your wheels dirty, you bastards. Get out there and get dancing, you know?
Yeah. So, sorry, John. So talking about creating things, right, and about journey and everything, let's talk about your album, right? Yep. How do you create an album like this? What's the journey like? How long does it take to create something like this? Can you walk us through it? And the difference between, say, CD1 and CD2?
How much battery life you got in that camera?
Don't worry, it's hooked up to power, mate.
Do you want to top up as well?
Yeah, mate, he's been talking the whole time. He hasn't even drank that.
Fucking hell. Yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. This is the first time I've ever done this.
What, drunk
Top
on?
up. No, top up.
Oh, right. Are we pausing or?
No.
Roll on. Okay.
I can edit this, mate. Don't worry. John's a good editor.
Okay. Okay, so what goes into an album? Okay, so the first album I did, Theatre of the Mind, was something I'd wanted to do for quite some time. And I knew I had a bunch of tracks that were album worthy. However, I really wanted to introduce a different part of my productions and a different part of my musical brain. I'm a huge fan of melodic, progressive, and very I guess you'd call it sort of maybe organic, progressive, organic house, a lot of Anjuna Deep stuff, like beautiful rolling melodies and all this stuff. So Ellie and I loved Ben Bowman, or still do, Ben Bowman, all these types of guys. And it was always something that was on the cards for me, but I probably needed a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of my production understanding to sort of start to make it. And I created the Highlander alias, and I did that on the first album, and I experimented with a lot of slower BPMs, a lot of down-tempo stuff, and I just loved it. There's more space between the beats. You can really play around, and it keeps things fresh in the studio as well. So you're not in there just writing arpeggiated melodies all the time. You're going in there and you're playing around with bass lines, and you're getting new synthesizers and things that work for that. So I did that on the first album, and I absolutely loved it. And the first album was fantastic. It went so well for me. And they say these days that albums, you know, they don't reap the rewards, and it's a lot of effort for not a lot of this because it just goes on Spotify and all that. And I was like, well, good mate of mine, Steve Hellstrip, Thrill Seekers, he was doing vinyls and all this stuff, and it was during COVID. I'm like, well, fuck it, why don't I put mine on vinyl as well? Because it's something cool, get back into my old sales game and sort of, you know, work out all the numbers and do all the designs and all that stuff. So for me, it was the whole package. And what goes into it fundamentally is just a shitload of ideas into a funnel, and then what pops out the other end is the cream, and then you sort of work it into a journey. Well, that was my process. So the Highlander stuff starts down in the early 120 BPMs and then fluctuates up until it gets to the Factor B disc, which is disc 2, and then it's more your uplifting trance stuff. So I loved that process, and I wasn't going to do another album. And then sadly in the last few years, I think most people would have an understanding of this, that I lost my fiance at the time, Ellie, and I lost my mum, both to cancer within 6 months in 2022. And obviously it was a very challenging time. And I just sort of lent on the things that I knew best that would give me some sort of direction or somewhere to put this energy. And that was music. And so I said to Ellie, when she was diagnosed, you know, I'm going to write an album for you, and, you know, you're going to help me write this album. We're going to sort of, you know, the longer you fight on, the more tracks you're going to hear and all this stuff. And sadly, what she had was just, it was brutal. And the poor thing she fought as hard as she could, but I didn't really get very far in the album side except for The Girl with Her Head in the Clouds, which has become probably the most popular track off the new album. And it was the first track I played. We lost her on April 1st, 2022, and then I was booked to play a Subculture the next day, and I'd cancelled the show. But sadly, when we lost her, I had no plans to play the show. But my mum actually called me, and she just said to me, "I think you should play the show." And I said, I just can't do it. And she goes, "Brendan, she'd want you to play the show." So we got my brother on the flights, and we worked it out because I was up in New South Wales at the time. And he found us some flights, and I called my agent, Rob. I'm like, "Mate, I'm coming to play the show." And he's just like, "Oh, what? Are you sure?" And I'm just like, "Yep, look, I'm not going to get in until 5 o'clock, but I'm coming to play the show." And he goes, "All right, I'll speak to Brian. We'll get him to play before you. Get your ass here, mate. We can't wait to see you." The rest of my family congregated, all my friends and everyone. And so I flew down to Melbourne. I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I just remember when I went up there and played, I'd had this demo version of what is now known as The Girl with the Head in the Clouds, which was built off the YouTube Where the Streets Have No Name, like the concept of it. And that was the last track that Ellie heard, because a friend of mine who you both know, Louise Marshall, she has a friend in Scotland, Craig Costello, who she put me onto to get a vocal done for it. This beautiful vocal that he's done. He's a rock guy. And he'd sent the vocal, and I'd put it over the top. And in Ellie's last few days, I showed her the track, and she was just like, "This is fucking unbelievable." And I was just like, "Isn't it? Like, unbelievable." And then, so Subculture came round, went down there, and I opened with that track. And it became sort of like the rebirth of the whole next phase of like, right, I promised her I was going to write this album. And from that moment, I've just been working tirelessly to try to capture not only her influence on my life, but also, sadly, then a couple of months later, we lost my mum. 6 months later, we lost my mum. We also lost my stepmum during that time as well, also to cancer. So it was just a very messy period emotionally and physically. And I then channeled as much as I could into what is now Theatre of the Mind Volume 2, which is called Bloom, in loving memory. And it's all of the storylines of my life with Mum and Ellie sort of put into music. And it was by far the most difficult musical project I've ever worked on. It's and I wasn't planning, like I said, I wasn't planning on doing an album straight after. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. It's 20. The first album was 20 tracks. This is 22 tracks, because I'm of the opinion of like an album, you're telling a story, like it's, a lot of people have albums, 9 tracks, 10 tracks, Everything it, fine. But this is like, I want to tell a real story, 2 hours or more. Putting it all together, it's got, again, follows the same format. The Highlander stuff is more down-tempo, melodic, but more lush. Well, maybe not as lush. They're both lush, but like it's slower and warmer. Then the Factor B stuff's all the uplifting stuff. It's taken me 2.5 years to sort of get there. And I've learnt an absolute shitload about when you're producing. I was having a lot of trouble early, like a lot of trouble I was putting so much pressure on what represents them. And I started listening to this book by Rick Rubin. It changed my life, actually. And it's called The Creative Act. And he's a very famous producer who's produced pretty much every major act in the world. And he doesn't know anything about music, but he's just like this guru. Anyway, he's done this book of all of the learnings that he's had about music, and it just opened up my eyes to like where music comes from and why you create and why you do all these beautiful things. And what it taught me fundamentally was I was going into the studio and trying to make music for them. But the truth is, the music that they'd loved that I'd made before was music that I had made that they loved. So when I flipped it around and tried to make it for them, I was kind of getting confused and lost in the productions a bit. It's like, it doesn't sound this and this. So I took the essence of what I wanted to do with them, but I stripped it back to the stuff that I loved making and why I loved making it and why they loved it. So it just freed me up. And then as the production started to come along, they just started to bloom into, reminds me of this time in 2017 with her and this and that. And it sort of just created this life of its own, and it really changed the whole project for me. And then the album that I've done, the CD version obviously, is 2 hours long and it's one continuous mix. And I wanted it to be this long flow, and I've joined all the tracks up with real audio from all of our lives. So from trips away, Lucy and I dug up some old VHS things that of my mum when she was like 6 years old down at our holiday house of mum saying things about it being in the kitchen, all this hilarious stuff. We've ripped them all. We've put them in different parts of the album. So it tells a story, and all of their voices are in the album in different parts. So cutting, well, it's a long explanation, but essentially what has gone into this has just been everything to me. Like absolutely my heart and soul poured into this, because on a emotional level, it's something that I want to be able to put up on the wall and fundamentally be able to move on with my life and not have this overwhelming sense that I just want to keep making music for them, because it's debilitating. It's very difficult. So I wanted this project to just be the Hail Mary of like, this is for them, everything into it, absolutely put my heart and soul into it, into the design and everything. And some artists are modest, some are this. I mean, this album is for me, and if other people love it, then that's the most beautiful thing. But I made this album for me, first and foremost, and I'm so fucking proud of it. I'm so in love with it. When I listen to it, that's why most people say this anyway. I cry during most of my sets, because when I listen to it, it's just so emotionally connected to my life with those two incredibly important people. Every time I play it, and I get to play it in front of people, and they get to feel it as well, and it's just a privilege.
Yeah,
you know?
I definitely think that other people feel that emotion through that. This music as well, mate. You're not the only one that cries, mate. When you play this music, mate, I think everyone else does as well.
I know, bless them.
So I suppose when you create an album for other people, you really care about what others think about it and everything else like that. So from what you've said to me, like when you created this, you've really done this for yourself, as you mentioned. But like when it goes out, like you just. To think that you wouldn't care because you've made it for yourself, but then so many people can connect with this album. Yeah. Like that must be an amazing feeling to be able to feel, you know?
It is, yeah. So going back to what I mentioned about the Rick Rubin book, one of his famous quotes that I used at the start of my State of Trance set last year was the audience comes last. The reason why he says that and why it's so important is because if you're making, like, we don't give the audience enough credit sometimes, you know, like people know when they're being played to, and people know when they're being taken on a journey. So if you're of the opinion, in my opinion, and it's what Rick says, which I agree with, if you're making music for the audience, you're not really putting you into it. You're making it for people that don't really exist. You know, you're making it for whoever's in front of you on social media or whatever else to appease them in some way. And it's not truly authentic. You might not be making that thing that you truly love. So there's that side of it. And then I feel like I think you get more out of it personally when you make it yourself. And I think if you're passionate about making music, then you tell a storyline that no one else can tell. And I think that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes it beautiful. And you can't control when an album comes out. He says this in the book. You could have the greatest record ever, the greatest album ever, and you go to release it and you've got all these expectations around it. But Michael Jackson Best Of Hits comes out the same weekend and yours just plummets to the bottom of the charts and no one hears about it or gives a fuck about it. How do you control that? You can't control that. So essentially, if you love it and you make it for you and you're proud of it and all of that, everything else is a bonus. And that's been a massive shift for me in how I see music and how I see creating music and what I put out into the world. I just want it to be the stuff that I love, and I feel after all those years as a punter, it's like, you know, when you hear something special and you resonate with that. You also know when you're hearing a DJ or someone play the stuff that they think that you want to hear. Yeah. And that's okay too. But I don't want to be that. I want to be someone that, you know, I might not ever make the big main stages of EDC and Tomorrowland, but I'll always have authentic music that people can turn to and go, he made that, and that's special and it's art and I can buy into that. And yeah, so that's what's most important to me when it comes to that. And yeah, absolutely, you want to sell as many as you can and all that stuff. But imagine you put all your effort into that and it doesn't sell. Does that mean the music's shit? Does that mean you're shit? Does that mean that like you're not good at what you do? No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
The moment you finish the track, the moment you put anything out into the world, you should be patting yourself on the back because you got the courage to do it.
Yeah, vulnerability, massively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like if you love it and you're passionate about it, you're already ahead of the game.
I think that's huge for me personally, being someone that produces music as well, because not a lot of people take risks, right? No. And if you're doing something just because you love it yourself, well, your taste in music is very niche, and you don't expect everyone else to understand your niche.
Exactly.
So to having the actual balls to put out something where it's for you, there's a reason why you stand out. You know, there's a reason why those artists that do what they do for themselves, why they stand out.
Yeah.
You know, like, man, people are into weird shit. You know, you're gonna find
Guilty.
You're gonna find feed pics. Nah, you're gonna find a niche. You know, if you bring it out and it's online these days, don't worry, you'll find your people.
Yeah,
you'll find your herd.
exactly.
So yeah, it's very refreshing to hear that, and maybe I might be a little bit more bold with the shit that I bring out as well.
Well, I mean, on that, I don't know if you've watched the Robbie Williams documentary, To Change Lanes.
Yeah, I have.
He had such a mindfuck, for want of a better way of putting it, because he was selling out stadiums around the world. He was selling out albums, top number one hit albums, all that stuff, singles. But yet the critics were saying he was rubbish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was so confused because he was like, well, what is it?
Yeah. And then he did that album for himself.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I can't remember what it was called. He was doing the rapping and stuff, and he said it was his best work ever. And the critics absolutely rinsed him for it.
Yeah.
The British ones did, at least.
Yeah.
And that's such a great sign of the times of just like people just want to drag people down. And I think maybe that's what scares artists a bit if they go out on a limb. But mind you, I mean, that's a really tough one to break down because he was just massissive.
Yeah.
He's the biggest artist in the world by a stretch for a few years there.
He just played New Year's Eve here in Sydney.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, actually, one of my mates went. Yeah,
It was nuts.
Yeah.
Mate, can I just touch on your last few years that you mentioned earlier with your mum and Ellie, and I had the was fortunate enough to meet her as well, and actually have drinks right here.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that? You know, because for someone, you're quite emotional, you're full of energy, full of beans.
Yeah.
What was other than music, how did you just kind of go through that journey? And I guess there's a little bit of I've just listened to the Moby podcast with Armin. I don't know if you listened to it.
Yeah, I saw a bit of it, not all of it though, yeah.
And Armin talks about kind of effectively COVID saving his life because he was in not a good space because of the Spotify pressure and the kind of need to manufacture tunes and stuff. And if you don't mind me asking, like, it was a tough time for you. And that moment that you spoke about in subculture, I just had that on this morning and dissolved this morning. Yeah. And I wanted to ask about the importance of your peers as well. So, your Brian Kearney and Fardy and John O'Callaghan, and how important have they been for your journey? Because they're all up on stage there and you're in their arms and they're with you, man. And I think a lot of people think that this industry is so everyone's in for themselves. Yeah. Sorry, I've asked about 30 questions.
No, I got you. Well, firstly, I think I don't think there was any one defining thing that sort of helped me through the journey. I'm still learning a lot about it each day. Straight away, I definitely didn't regret in any way, shape or form playing that show because it just kind of gave me this moment to just release and to remind myself in some ways that life's going to go on. And that's, to be honest, for anyone that's lost someone close to them, one of the hardest things to try to digest is that life just goes on. And you're looking around like, hang on, how are you smiling? How are you happy after all these things that have happened? And I really struggled with that because I am quite a happy-go-lucky guy. Chew the leg off a chair, put a glass eye to sleep most nights at the pub. But, there I was, just like I didn't have anything to say for quite some time. Like I was blown away that life had just shattered so quickly and so brutally to someone that was just so beautiful and the kindest soul. I mean, you'd met her. Everyone that had met Ellie, like I know everyone always says these things, but she was just an absolute diamond. She just lit the room up. She was the sweetest person. She put me to shame. Anytime we went to a show, she would be the feature, and I
when are you playing?
Love that.
It's him.
Exactly. She was just the best. I'd come backstage I remember I was playing a boat from Sweden to Helsinki, and I came backstage after the set, and she was in there with a bucket on her head, and one of the security guys had a like a plaster on his arm, and she was hopping on one leg, and they were all cheering her, and I walked in, I'm like, what the fuck is going on in here? She pulled the bucket off, and she goes, shut up, we're doing this, and this. I was just like, all right. Did you get any videos of the set? No, okay, I'll sit down. You know, like, She was just an amazing person. So to lose her in such horrible and devastating and just ugly circumstances just shifted my whole paradigm of life. Like it became clear that this is not forever. We're all susceptible. It doesn't discriminate. And to, try to make the most of what you've got. And for the first few months, I was obviously in a pretty dark spot. Didn't really know what to do, whether I was moving back to Amsterdam, whether I was staying in Australia or not. But, when someone's going through something like that, you, fortunately in some ways, is you still talking to each other, and, we knew what was coming, but we were, mature enough to have conversations about what was happening. And, she made it very clear to me that she didn't want me to suffer any more than I'd have to in the whole thing. And to go back to Amsterdam and to keep chasing the music and keep chasing the dream and keep doing the album and all these things. And that would make her the proudest, because she just felt so bad that it was just taking so much from us. And that was just a true representation of her and her personality. Like, she felt bad during it, that she was taking things away from us, So I used that energy and that strength, and that's why this album was so important for me to put my energy into. I did move back over to Amsterdam and got back into the shows, bought a place over there, just went all in, because you just start to realise that nothing's forever, and you just go, fuck. If I want to live there, I'm just going to go buy a place, I'm going to do all these things. Yeah. And then you've got the support of your mates. But it's tricky because you're living in Amsterdam, you got your mates there, you got your mates here, you're kind of in between. So I resorted a little bit to some travel as well. So for 6 months, I kind of travelled around. That's where I wrote most of the tracks for the album, the ideas from. Yeah. A Gift to the Earth is one of the more popular tracks from the album. That's actually after being on just travelling around and putting her ashes in different places around the world as a gift back to the earth. Wow. And I got a lot of inspiration and a lot of strength from taking her to some of her favourite places, and mum also. So that just kept the journey going, and I had friends coming in and out of my life, helping, etc. But obviously my sister was a huge influence. She moved over to Amsterdam a couple of years ago during the summer, and she came and lived with me and was just a beautiful support mechanism for me. Probably one I didn't know I needed, but she'd obviously lost her mum, so we both lost our mums, and sometimes it just didn't dawn on me, like I was so lost in the whole thing that it's like, shit, my brother and my sister have lost mum as well, So she came over and she was a jet, and we just sort of started to rebuild our lives a bit. Made some big life changes. She quit her job and moved over, and you rely on other people, but this is probably not the most popular opinion, but in my experience, I think when you lose someone like that, there's not really much anyone can say. Saw a few therapists, did a few things to work on myself, and all helpful in some ways. But I found that it was just really something that I had to manufacture myself to be able to cope with it and get over it. Music was a part of it, but also it was just a lot of self-belief and just a lot of, just inner strength and just making peace with things, and then, fast forward to, perhaps the Luminosity set or the Subculture set. The music industry, I think it doesn't matter if you're a musician or a builder, if you lose someone close. I mean, the guys all knew Ellie from the tours and stuff, so they were devastated as well. And to have those guys there for that show, Fardy and Giuseppe and John and Brian, was really sweet. And those guys, because Ellie and I went to John's wedding, so like we were pretty ingrained with these guys, and we're all a bit of a family there. So it hit them hard too, and they've just been super supportive of me and of all the things I'm doing. But fast forward to today, like I was saying earlier, that album for me is somewhat of I get to, now that it's released, or it's coming soon, but a lot of people have it.
This is literally hot off the press here, guys. We've got pink vinyl as well.
Yeah.
Is there a reason? There you go. Sorry.
Yeah. So Ellie actually dyed her hair pink before she started her chemotherapy for the second time round. Yeah. And so we sort of went with the pink, and we've got T-shirts made up for her and jumpers and all that. So the pink is a representation of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that's actually art in its own.
Yeah.
That's what you don't get when you buy an MP3, kids.
Yeah.
MP3, listen to this boy.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah. You wouldn't download a car.
What do you buy now?
Shut up, bro.
Lucy's laughing me in the background. She's like, who is this clown?
Yeah.
What do you buy off Spotify? Is that not MP3?
It's probably I don't know, bro. It's not really
streaming.
Streamed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anyway, back to the vinyl.
Yeah. But no, that's where the pink comes from. And as I was saying before, that's why this album has been such a monumental step in my healing journey, because you can go down a path of just wanting to make music and just healing yourself all the time by like, I want to make another track. I want to make another track in their name and this and that. But for me, I found it to be just overwhelming. It was too much. So I said to myself, right, I'm going to do this album. I'm going to put my blood, sweat and tears into this, and it's going to take however long it's going to take. And then when it's done, I'm going to be able to just let it out into the world. Yeah. And that's me being able to say my most beautiful goodbye to them in terms of like having to feel like there's something I need to do to put them on a pedestal. That's what that is. And that'll always be that. And something that is beautiful about Spotify is you can see who's listening to music at any time when you go onto the thing. And like I was saying earlier, sometimes when when you lose someone, you're like, who's thinking about them? Like, where did they go? Am I in this alone? It's this beautiful little thing that you can jump on Spotify, and when people are listening to the music, you go, someone's listening to a track that I made for her. And that makes me feel fucking amazing. I don't know why, but it just does. The audience comes last, but I tell you right now, when I see that there's 20 people listening to whatever it is at that point in time, it makes me go, she's living on in their ears, you know, and that to me is beautiful. And then when the album comes out next Friday, Mum's voice, Ellie's voice is all throughout the tracks and stuff. So I'll know that people will be listening. And in a lot of my sets recently as well that I've been playing, their voices are in the sets. So I know people are hearing their voices and they're hearing the inspiration that they gave me.
You've truly made something there where they can live on forever.
Correct.
Mate, beautiful.
Yeah.
Stunning. And I've got no shadow of a doubt when you drop all these in Melbourne next week, which is obviously the homecoming launch for you. The crowd are going to dissolve just as much as you. So
it's going to be a good one.
Yeah. So what next for you?
Well, this afternoon we're going to go play some tunes at Cafe Del Mar, which I think is going to be average at best. I actually can't wait for it. I mean, I love long extended sets. 5 hours is going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's a great number.
Yeah, get to play all the new stuff from the album. What's next for me? It's a bloody good question. This album has just been my whole fucking existence for the last 2.5 years. And I don't really know what's next in terms of the music side. I'm going to always keep creating music and all this type of thing. But what's next, I think I'm going to soak in everything that comes from this album. And I'll be releasing singles from it for the next 9 months at least. There's 22 tracks, so there's at least sort of 16 singles on there. Yeah. Plus remixes, commission some remixes and all that type of stuff as well. But what's next for me is I think really on a personal and emotional level, I think it's really just coming to grips with I can start to lighten the load on my emotions of putting something together that is beautiful and that represents the effect that they had on my life. Because that's probably been the toughest thing for me, is getting something where I feel like I've done enough to, represent the love and the sacrifice and all the things that a mother has for her son and that a partner has. Like like we said earlier, leaving her job and just coming over to Amsterdam. I wouldn't have been able to do it without Mum's musical influence, and I wouldn't have been able to forge a career if Ellie hadn't come over and been there as a support, as a girlfriend, as an incredible human. So now it's like a little bit of a blank slate or a fresh slate, and it's exciting because I'm just gonna the album's called Bloom. When Ellie was diagnosed as terminal, she went and got a tattoo on her arm, which is actually the bloom on the album. That's taken off her arm. So we had a photo of that, and we lifted it off her arm and put it on. And the girl with her head in the clouds as well, the single is actually another tattoo from her arm. Yeah. But Bloom, reason why she got Bloom on her arm is because she said every morning when she wakes up and she has to face all the blood tests and all the chemo and all that stuff, it's like, remember just to get up and bloom, just make the most of it. So the theory and the idea behind the album is bloom, and just to get up each day and just sort of make the most of it, no matter how shit it might be, and to bloom again. And that's sort of where I'm at now, taking a bit of my own medicine. And once the album's out, I'm sort of going to have this like fresh slate, and then I'm going to just bloom into something new with a new perspective.
Well, mate, what validation for that? Because you also got, Armin, you got number 2, didn't you, on Armin's top 100 tunes for 2024. You got number 2. So I guess for the validation, and I think when you were talking about when you do a tune the week before, then you bust out the white label and you want to see people's feedback, you're looking for validation. Yeah. When you jump behind the 1s and 2s all the time, you're looking for people to validate. So that's validation. Number 2 out of 100 tunes for the year. Yeah, that shows you how many people have been along with you on the journey.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's where, like, whilst people can't be there, and look, you would have got enough maybe semi-drunken messages from me on WhatsApp just saying, mate, I've just listened to this set, like, you tickle my brain.
Yeah.
That's people saying, hey, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I can't be next to you and giving you a hug, but I'm with you. So I think when people buy the vinyl, they buy the CD, they vote for you. Yeah. That's their way of blooming for you.
Absolutely. And like I said before, like, it's the audience comes last when you're making this stuff. But, when something is successful, you absolutely appreciate it. Yeah. I said to my sister, from the moment I played that track at Subculture, the next day after she passed, it's like, I know this track's going to be, a big record. And, its journey, it had a journey of its own. And then when the countdown type of thing was on, I mean, it's had lots of streams and lots of purchases and all this sort of stuff, which is great. But when it came to the countdown, like, it was a great example of the Rick Rubin theory. It's like, is my track any worse if it comes 10th or 20th? Does it have any less meaning? Does it mean more? So when it came in second, yeah, sure, fuck, I wish it came in first. That would have been great. It was so close. But I said that, like, if it goes top 10 or whatever, fantastic. I'm still happy. It's still this record that's going to be whatever it is. And when it came in second, it was fantastic. Like, I was pretty emotional in the studio, but I knew that no matter where it came, I knew its value and I knew what its story meant to myself and people. And, it was just nice that people really did get behind it.
Yeah. For me personally, being a trance producer as well and a punter since I was 8, The Girl with Her Head in the Clouds is potentially one of the best tracks I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, thanks, brother.
When I first heard that, like, let's talk about emotion, like, it was tear-jerking for me. And me being a callous motherfucker, when I first heard that track, I was like, this is the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. So congratulations on that track. It is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you. I know I've played it before, and then Jonathan also loves hearing it as well. It's for us, it's just such a great track, man, and well done, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that hits on such a different level compared to normal music. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and huge credit's got to go to Craig Costello as well. When I sent him the brief for that, again, using all of that pedigree of loving all the rock music when I was younger, fucking everything from In Excess to Guns N' Roses to Metallica, and just hearing that raw voice is so great. And when Lou told me about Craig and I heard some of his stuff, I'm just like, mate, what do you think about doing something like this over this track? And gave him the brief, and he just fucking nailed it, hit it out of the park. And sure, the track would still be fantastic without it, but just his emotional voice in that is just outstanding. Yeah. So I'm so appreciative of his work on it. And how it all came together. And I'm glad that it's definitely a track that people feel a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the track before that also from the first album called Sea of Thoughts, that was a track that was on that same sort of level. It was, it's just a record that, someone asked me a little while ago, if you were gone tomorrow, what's 2 tracks that you'd want them to hear to represent your sound? And I'd be like, Girl with the Head in the Clouds and Sea of Thoughts. And that's, for me, is like, because it takes, but even people who don't like trance, who heard that stuff, they're just like, wow, I felt that. And for me, that's the biggest compliment you could ever get. It's just like someone who doesn't really listen to trance or electronic music, they just go, shit, man, I really felt that. So you're onto something special there. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that you feel that way.
Yeah. No.
Can I make my first request for the day?
Far out.
Can I see more of Highlander on the Amsterdam canals with a sun hat and a beer in his hand in a canoe?
Yeah, we need more of that, mate.
What was the idea behind that? Because it was cracking.
A lot of weed.
And a question I had.
You know what we should do?
We
should ride a boat around during COVID when there's no one allowed on the streets. It'll be like 28 days later. And I should play tunes. Because everyone was doing streams from their bedrooms and all this stuff.
Guilty.
And and it was good. People were doing music and stuff. And I'm just like, my creative brain's like, I refuse to do it. I'm like, nah, I can't do it from the house. It's not me. And my mate Breck, shout out to Breck, he had a boat in Amsterdam, and we were chatting somewhere, illegally chatting out in public during COVID without our masks on. And he goes, mate, why don't we get the boat and we can go around and play some tunes? I'm like, maybe we should film it. And then my mate goes, I got a 360 camera. So we had like a broom and all these things set up rig on there. Yep. It was unreal. I'd grown the moustache out. I was just a fucking,
It was hideous.
You were Aussie, mate.
Yeah. I had he had some beers that you can only get in Perth. I can't remember what they were called, emus or something, Australian beers that you can, And so we're on this boat, and I just remember the first time we went out and we captured the footage, I was just like, this is fucking awesome. It's so awesome. I smoked a bit before I watched it.
But
anyway,
Amsterdam is a beautiful city to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing that people, they might pick up on it, but because it was during COVID, if you look, so the camera circles around and stuff, it's during COVID, there's no one in the streets. Everything is shut. So we literally had Amsterdam to our fucking selves, and we're just rocking around with a fucking Aussie hat and a beer and glasses, smoking joints, playing tunes and streaming it. And people, even today, I'll be in some club in fucking Eastern Europe, in the Czech Republic, or something, and some guy will come and goes, your hat and your boat stream it changed my life. And I'm just like, you've seen that? He goes, oh, COVID, it saved me during COVID. And so many people have said that, and it's been. At the time, it was just like I wanted to do something different. But then people are like, we get to see all these beautiful things in Amsterdam but while listening to music. And we do some cool effects with the videos and all that stuff. And Lucy, my sister, was showing some of her mates, and they were just like, this is fucking wild.
Yeah,
like, how did you do that?
Wicked.
And I didn't know until we'd sort of got the footage that it was like, this is actually really fucking cool, because it was an absolute hatchet job to set the whole thing up. We had a broom at the front, we had this and that, we had towels all around, we had a little speaker for the sound, and it just came out so well, and it just inspired so many people, and I'm just so grateful.
Did you enjoy it whilst doing it?
Absolutely. And we ended up doing a few more.
Sick.
We ended up doing 4 of them. And get this, here's one for you. We did a 2-hour set for Lumi. We got back, we're like, that was fucking unbelievable. Put the camera on, and we'd had it on slow motion. So it was just me just like doing these slow motion moments, and it just recorded for 40 minutes, and we're out there for 2 hours, and we're like, all right, better go out again. But also we had to wait for the days that were sunny and beautiful. So it was like we were on sort of standby the whole time. But no, absolutely love that. And I look back on that as definitely something that was beautiful that came out of the whole COVID period. So yeah, I'm glad that people still watch it and still love it. And in short, yes, I absolutely want to do another one. However, the canals are generally quite busy now.
Yeah.
Everything's open. You can't pump music when you're on boats and stuff like that. There are ways around it. You can do it in your headphones and all that stuff. But we're actually thinking of doing something around a concept for that next year, which is going to be some boat parties around the world, which kind of play on that sort of thing. So,
Mate, and I know I've texted you this when I've been lying on a sunbed in Hawaii. I'm like, because you remember you did those sets that were almost in Search of Sunrise-esque.
Yeah.
Do you remember you did them back in like 16 and 15?
Almost
like Sunlight. What was it?
Yes, Sounds of the Sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Cracker.
I literally, and I think I've even said this to you, I'm like, we need to get you on a super yacht in Sydney. And just do
I've always said that. You know?
We need to do tough laps on the harbour. I mean, me and super yachts.
Yeah, I know.
We go together well.
Oh, wait, I'm not DJing. No. I just want to get on a super
we
yacht.
need to get you like doing an open till close on a super yacht, like limited tickets.
Yeah.
Probable, like maybe we put the proceeds to charity and things like that. Like we need to do it properly because it's just like the one I'm looking forward to today is like the journey of a 5-hour set. It's not like a powerhouse 60-minute. No, it's the journey, right?
Yeah,
and that's
no chop and drop here, mate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's my favourite stuff. Yeah. And this is like what we're talking about throughout this chat is that being a punter first. I absolutely frothed on going to see Armin do 6-7 hour sets, getting there early and just listening to these guys go through. And you listen to say Ahern and Catania, or
big time.
Even I've seen Paul Van Dyke do long sets. Yeah, I mean, there's just you really hear. In my opinion, you separate the men from the boys when you're doing these long sets. And also, it's about the courage to play tracks that people come and see, they go, oh, he's trance. The first couple of hours today is going to be progressive. It's going to be up and down. It's going to have swings and roundabouts. It's not just going to be this like this going up into trance. It's about taking people on a sonic journey, you know, and as self-absorbed and weird as that sound, it's like this is when you go to listen to someone play a long set that cares about it as much as me. You're not just hearing a 5-hour set. You're hearing 25 years of me listening to music on the dance floor, at home, off my chops somewhere. Just, it's all stored in there somewhere. Even when I was young with mum and dad playing music at home, it's all in there somewhere in some sort of database. And when it comes to these long sets, it's like, I want to create a story and you are going to be the only ones that hear it. But it's not just like picking out the best tracks of the last 5-6 years, whatever. I got tracks lined up today that people wouldn't have heard in 20 years. Brilliant. And it's like, that's the fun of it. And you get to see the real side of the real music side or the musical side or the depth of someone's passion for the music when you hear an extended set. And I've been to certain people's extended sets or heard them online because I'm always curious to hear where people go with it. And it's, you know, it's not as much of a journey, and that doesn't appeal to me as much. It's kind of like almost like a best of for 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever. I think with these types of sets and those sounds of the sunlights, it's about highlighting the music that you don't get to play as a trance DJ, but still represents trance. You know, like they'd hear it and go, what the fuck is that tune? I'd play that. It's still trancey. It's still beautiful. It's still melodic. It's still got all these beautiful elements in it, but it's just not 140. It's 125 or it's 128. And where I feel, you know, maybe a good answer to what you said about what's next, I want to introduce more of this type of stuff to the trance audience because I know they'll fucking love it. Because if they love the music that I make, so much of the inspiration for it comes from these tracks. So if we can just open the storybook up for people to see the whole spectrum of it, I think we'll get more people in. And like my sister said, her mates, they don't really know trance that well, but they came to the show at the Boiler Room and they were like, oh, a bit of Fred again, a bit of this at the start, just sort of like chopping it up a bit, but then it goes into the trance. When the trance comes, they go, fuck, this is fucking awesome well. You know, and a great example as well was a couple of them went and see Ben Boma and he's amazing. But at the end, they were like, when does it launch? When does it go? When do we reach for the lasers and take our shirts off and grab someone and say, I love you, mate? And you realise it's your fucking mate from work and you go, fuck, what are you doing here? Fuck. Sell us a bicky, mate, or something, you know, some crook shit. You know, like there's...
I feel like I've been recorded right now.
A bicky's water for all those kids at home. But, you know, like there's a level to this, and I feel there's a gap in the market between the beautiful stuff that is in the Sounds of the Sunlight type stuff and the stuff that I make. And it's that sort of where I want to move towards, and that's what the album represents as well.
Just selfishly right here, there was also another gap that you need to look into, and that's the one towards liquid drum and bass. Bro, your music would fucking slay as liquid drum and bass. Please figure out those percussions and do it.
I actually love drum and bass.
Yeah.
Like I really
Bro,
do.
You could destroy Hybrid Minds.
Look, it's a whole new way of producing. But there is a big I wouldn't say drum and bass, but it's a big breakbeat track. There's actually a couple of breakbeat tracks, but there's a 140 breakbeat track on the album that's a Highlander mix. Because Highlander's not just slower stuff. The Highlander stuff's just experimental stuff. So I've got a 140 BPM Highlander track that is a remix of Lostly and I's track. And it's just like, I'll play it this afternoon as well. It's just, I love it. Because I'm big on percussion. I played drums for 9 years. I'm having a midlife crisis. I'm going to buy a drum kit when I get back to Amsterdam.
Nice.
Set it up in the lounge room, just right in the way of everything. So everyone has to walk past it,
mate.
you know? Yeah, well, you can get, the electric ones look all right these days. But I'm thinking, getting something big and beefy. But I love that. Like, I'm a big percussion guy, and you don't really get to fuck around with percussion in trance that much because it's so fast. But when you slow it down, you'll hear
You can speed it up as well, though. No.
Exactly, that's true. But with the Highlander stuff on this album, it's a lot of emphasis on the percussion side as well.
Yeah, so confirmed drum and bass is coming.
You heard it first here, guys.
Hey, I'm going to shoot you some quick questions, right? I want to know, analog or digital?
Well, me and the boys in Amsterdam we call cigarettes analog, and we call vapes digital.
So you vape?
No.
You
Don't vape at home, kids. Jesus Christ, just smoke an analog for fuck's sake. I would say, it's a good question. Most people would be like, oh, analog, blah, blah, blah. Analog's a fucking pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah, it's such a pain in the ass.
I got a JP8000, which I wrote most of the album on. However, it's kind of like digital. Yeah. But I've worked with some analog stuff with Lostly. I love it. It's warmer. It's great. But to be honest, I feel like you can get pretty close.
Out of the box now is just...
You can get pretty close to analog with the digital stuff now. So I'd have to say for ease of use and for what I like to use, I'd say digital.
What DAW do you use?
Front door, mostly.
Yeah. And other than that?
I'm on Cubase 13.
Yeah.
I learnt that when I went to SAE here.
I went to SAE.
Yeah. I learnt on Cubase 5.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's just like a lot of people always ask what the best DAW is.
Whatever you use,
It's whatever you know how to use, you know. I've watched Lostly work on Ableton, and he's just a mega mind. He's amazing. He just flicks through all these things and stuff, and then I have my own process on Cubase, and it's just what makes your music yours. So for anyone wondering what's the best or whatever, it's just whatever you like using the most.
Top 3 producers today for you? Not all time, so you don't have to feel bad.
Like in general or in trance?
In general. Okay, trance. Is that easier?
Okay, I would say... Okay, I'll make a little mixture. I think people who are really breaking the lines, which I have the utmost appreciation for, I'd have to say, in no particular order, I'd say Fred again is someone who... You know, we have this whole world of people, these influencers and these musicians and all this stuff, trying to be famous and doing all this stuff. He is just on a level of his own. He became famous because of how fucking good his music is and how creative he is. And he's such an inspiration to other music makers, in my opinion. And listening to some of his stuff, especially the album he made during COVID, was just fucking awesome. It was real, it was honest, so creative. So I'd say he's definitely up there for me as a big inspiration. I would say Ben Boma has just carved out his own sound.
Yeah, phenomenal sound.
He's another one who's... I see people talking about social media and the importance of social media, and you have to be this personality on social media to become famous in music. Well, Ben Boma didn't fucking do that. Yeah. He did it with his music. Yeah. His music is what he led the way with, and he continues to, and he's bigger than all those other chumps. So he's a huge inspiration, and his music is just phenomenal. And then third, I would say maybe in the trance realm, I say the guy who's inspired me for a long time and great mate of mine is Lostly. Probably doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but he will in these next few years because he's back making trance, and we're working on a couple of projects with each other at the moment. But he's just, if you listen to some of his back catalogue stuff, By Morning You'll Be Gone, Colorways, Ellie and I would just sit in the lounge room at home at an after party just listening to it. Just inspiring stuff. Like the way he does ups and the way he creates things. And I've been with him many, many times. A big part of this album, actually, that I left out, which you were saying, Jay, about friends. There was a period when I was traveling in Europe after the loss of Ellie, and we did her memorial in Amsterdam. Then we did the show, and I had family and friends all there. Lossley, Andre, he just separated from his wife, and he had a place for a couple of months that he had to see the lease out on in Leichlingen in bumfuck Germany. And he goes, why don't you come live with me? So I was like, fuck it, why not? I went to a mate's birthday in Champagne like the week before, then I got the train, and I lived with Lossley. And he was going through his grief, I was going through my grief. Not one was bigger than the other, but in a sense, but we were both still going through our own grief, you know. Now you could argue, separation from a wife versus a loss is like, there's probably one's heavier than the other, but for him that was his grief.
The grief process.
That was that was the worst thing that had happened to him in a grief sense in that way. So we bonded deeply and really connected, not only just on that, but through music and stuff. And he was such just a beautiful human and person to have in my life during that time. And he features 3 times on the album, and we're doing some more stuff for the future, because he was there for me, and we just had some great experiences in the middle of Germany. I was getting racially vilified every time I walked down the street, but he was able to hear what they were saying because he speaks German, so that was eye-opening. But we're in the middle of nowhere, like middle of Germany, like absolutely nowheresville, and it was just a great reminder that like you find solace in the weirdest places, you know. And there's a track 2 on the Highlander disc called Epiphany River, and we used to go down to this river that was near his place and plonk our chairs in the water and just suck back tinnies for the afternoon and just cry and talk about experiences and get all spiritual and stuff. And it was just really helped build the foundations for like the grieving process for me, for each other. So that was a really important and a great example of the importance of having good friends around you during that time.
Yeah. So intimate gig or festival?
Most people go, intimate gig because of this and that and whatever, and I agree with that. I think the intimacy of a small gig, you feel the energy a bit more. But if I've also had some moments during big festivals where the whole place just fucking upends itself over a track, and it's just like, fuck, that's hard to match, you know, when you've got 10,000 people all just dropping on some classic that you drop, or a track that, you know. A couple of years ago, or maybe 5 years ago now, I had the whole crowd singing Crashing Over, and it was like 4,000 or 5,000 people singing Crashing Over, and I turned the track off and they just sung it. That was just spine-tingling stuff, right? So that's an amazing moment. But overall, I think the intimacy of a club and people feeling like they're up and about, like the Boiler Room last year, that was just fucking so cool. You can reach out and just high-five everyone, I think, So I don't even know if that's an answer. I like them both, but but I'd say intimacy.
Be a politician.
Politician. And to be honest, grazing over it like that was pretty much what I wanted to hear. So it's good. It was good to hear. So people these days, I won't keep it much longer. I know you got a gig that we all need to attend. So
nah, it's all right. Let's keep rolling. I'm half drunk now, and it's all right. The set's already ready, so let's roll as long as you want, boys.
So in regards to, I see a lot of artists these days self-releasing, right?
What websites are you on, mate?
Is this on Napster?
There's definitely LimeWire material right here. No, but I've seen like a lot more people. It's becoming common now to not go through labels or something like that, where they can just want to release their own stuff themselves. Do you have any advice on that, or you're signed to labels, so it's hard to make judgment on that. But what's your thoughts on it?
Great question. Well, this album and the last album are all self-released. So my label, Theatre of the Mind, is something that I got some advice from a few artists, Steve Hellstrip and Solarstone, and a few guys about what it takes to self-release. And to be honest, with the change in the landscape of social media and everything, if you've got a fan base or you're building up a fan base, sure, the big labels are important, but if you've got a fan base, you can reach them and connect with them way better than the bigger labels do. The bigger labels can go far and wider and have the relationships with Spotify. And there's a whole nother angle to that. I wouldn't say corruption, but there's a lot more leniency towards the bigger labels when it comes to Spotify and placements and all that stuff, which is something you learn when you go independent. But regardless of that, going independent and doing your own thing is beneficial in so many ways. One, you own your own music outright. You can do whatever you want. So if you want, you can make your own CDs, you can make your own vinyls, you can do all your own stuff, and it's all yours. The only thing you'll pay is a distributor's fee. So I have a distribution deal with Arnie and the guys at Black Hole, and they're fucking amazing. I love working with them, so they help with all the distribution to the DSPs and all that. But everything else, I look after myself. I own my catalogue, I own everything, which means if you get a play on ASOT, if you get a play on the radio, if you get plays at shows and all that, and you submit all your set lists and stuff, it all comes back to you because you own the tracks. So it's beneficial on a financial sense. It is rewarding on a sense that you have full control. You don't need someone else's opinion on a track. And I think that's really important because probably 3 of my biggest tracks were turned down. Crashing Over, Sea of Thoughts. What was the other one that I sent to Armada, I think.
Really? You get shit pushed back?
Yeah. Not quite in that sense, but
we're talking about self-releasing.
Yeah, self-releasing and stuff. Yep. And they, and then I released it. I remember a few years back. I sent Crashing Over to Armada, and they said no, and it came like 15 or something in the countdown for the year. And I remember looking at Armin when he was announcing it. He's like, "I swear this one got sent to us or something." But like, but I didn't take it personally. It's like, remember when you're sending to a label. The label's job is to find music they can monetize, what works for them. And as the music industry's gotten wider but smaller in a sense, niche-wise, sending a Highlander track to Armada is not going to be beneficial for them. Send it to Anjuna Beats. It's not really going to be beneficial to them. It's beneficial to me. So if I have control on releasing it, then it just gives you much less stress. You don't go into the studio thinking, oh, what label should I send this to, or where's this going to fit, which I think can really hamper producers these days.
I was going to say, like, if you knew you were making a label for Anjuna Beats or Anjuna Deep or A State of Trance, or you would try and replicate that sound, which takes it away from what we spoke about earlier, which is your sound. Yeah, essentially, I feel like, I think every producer innately is trying to create something different and new, but they always... Not always, but they tend to fall into, this sounds like something, there's always a reference. It's always like, this is very Anjuna-y. Oh, this is very trancey. Or this is something. So you have that feeling, but then, where you get the real joy is when you make something like, I don't know where this fits. And it doesn't matter because I'm going to release it myself. Yeah. And sure, I'm not going to get the big push on Spotify and all these things. But like we were talking about earlier, when you go out and you understand your market and you sell 1,000 CDs and 700 vinyls, Spotify who? Like the money that is in physical merch for people that care about these things, it is literally the difference between an artist going down the gurgler and an artist thriving to make more music for people. So to everyone out there and yourselves who buy merchandise off myself and other artists, it helps them so much, especially if it's their own label, because they can get the benefits of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not quite on the super yachts or anything like that, but it gives me some financial cushion to be like, right, what's the next thing that's going to inspire people? Because if I'm sitting there, like we talked about at the start, worrying about how am I going to pay the rent next month, I better make a track that fits FSOE or Armada so I can get a deal and get an advance and do this and that, which so many artists unfortunately fall into because it's a real rat trap out there for this stuff. The quality of the music drops, the quality of the creativity drops, the time frame becomes shorter, and the quality naturally starts to dissipate. Whereas if you don't have this pressure and you can just create, and like I said, come back to it after a few weeks and recreate something else in the breakdown and do this, people hear it. I feel like people hear it because I felt like I heard it. When I listened to a nitrous oxide breakdown or I listened to a Ferry Corsten breakdown, I could hear that there's more than just that's a cool idea, let's go with that. It's like, you can just hear there's more to it. It's really intricate. Thrill Seekers as well. There's just different sounds, different elements. It's like me and Luce always joke, a good track when you listen to it 20 times and every time you listen to something new, you connect with something big different, a little sound or a little thing. And that's a big part of what theatre of the mind is about. I want you to listen to these tracks and I want you to hear something different almost every time you listen to it. It's a tough way to produce and it's a really strenuous way to produce, but it is, for me, the only way I think where you stand out amongst all of the music that comes out these days. And Ben Bowman does that really well, and so does Fred again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Have you gone through your list?
No.
Well, you crack on. This is the first time we've actually had any questions.
I know, right? Usually I'm sitting here, I let him drive the whole time, but this time I've actually got some questions. But I'm out of questions. No, well, actually, go back on that. Do you think there is benefits, though, to releasing on a label? You said you reach a wider audience. Is it beneficial to start out with signing to a label and then going to do your own stuff?
I think so. I think there's always a benefit in having the spearheads of the label playing your music. So if you sign a track to Vandit, Paul Van Dyke's going to play it. If you sign a track to Future Sound of Egypt, Fardy's going to play it. So he's going to play it at all these shows. Same with maybe not so much Armada, because there's so many different subcategories and stuff. But having more prominent artists play your music on bigger stages is always a huge thing. That's what really lifted me when I had John and Brian and Schneider and all these guys playing my tracks on all the big stages. It was like, okay, people are hearing this. People are recognizing your name in set lists and all that stuff. So I think you always need a little bit of a leg up. For me, it was Dan and Neptune Project. Like when he first heard Stratos Galaxius, he was like, he could tell. He's like
another fan of the Long Breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. And he knows. He comes from that sort of ilk as well. It's like you know that there's more to the music. This is not just a cut and paste job. This is like, he actually gives a shit about his breakdowns. He gives a shit about all the elements and stuff. So when you get someone to sort of get behind you at the start and champion your sound a bit, I think it's a really important part of it. It's just getting harder and harder to do that, because nowadays, I openly and honestly, outside of these long sets, I'm playing mostly my own tracks.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't have a lot of space for other people's music these days, because you're doing hour sets and I've got, 20 tracks to play of my own. So definitely at the start, there's no point going independent straight away if you haven't got legs yet. But at the same time, if no one's signing the music, you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
When it comes to production, favorite synth drum machine? Like, are you like a 707 man? Do you like use machine?
I actually write my drums individually. So I write all the different sounds. I bring single samples in. I might get a loop in and then I'll put stuff over it. Then I'll pull the loop out. But I don't use a drum machine of sorts. I just drop the individual samples in. But
unless you're creating the drum kit yourself, the drum kits come from somewhere. So is 707 sound, 808, 909?
The 909 is the more classic sound, I think, and I think that's more prominent in like all of the early Ferry stuff and that. So I'd have to say, if there was one to go to be the 909. Yeah.
Favorite synth?
For me, the JP 8000.
8000, yeah.
That for me has given me some of the best sounds for my type of music.
Also genre defining.
And I'd say Secret Weapon is probably the Diva.
It's
not really that suited for trance in many ways, except some. And if you know how to use it properly, you can get some fucking beautiful sounding stuff out of that. We talked about analog or digital. That synth sounds very, very analog. And for instance, Giuseppe uses that for most of his tracks, if not all of them.
Additive synthesis or subtractive?
Subtractive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the main one. That's it, man. I'm relieved. I'm self-released.
I was going to say you're self-released right now.
And what about yourself? Are you still making tunes? Or?
Yeah, I started up again, right? So I was writing a bit of synthwave stuff, just because I love 80s music and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed making that stuff. But recently, so Elucidus sort of split up a bit. Ryan went back overseas to Scotland. Roy had a beautiful daughter. So we sort of broke away for a bit. Yep. I started writing
all
my
the
own
best
stuff.
bands do, mate, and then they come back together.
The boy bands. Yeah, so I started writing my own stuff again, and then pretty much rekindled a studio session a couple times, and then we started writing our own stuff again. So this year, Fables, we've got about 9 tracks already lined up.
Nice.
So the next couple of months should be pretty big for us.
Good work.
But yeah.
It never leaves you though, right?
No,
it's always there, and you get back in. You go, I mean, you've got a job, a real job. It's my whole life, so I'm always finding ways to stay inspired and stuff. But like when I wasn't doing this full time, I was doing like what you were. Like you'll have periods in your life where you're like, fuck, it's really inspirational and exciting and you want to get into it. and there's other points where it's not so exciting.
Yeah.
And it's just about enjoying those moments when it is and capturing them as best you can.
Yeah, I found myself really digging it again. Not only that, I think I've also developed myself a lot further where, you know, if I want a sound or something in particular, I can make it.
Yep.
And then also doing whatever the fuck I really want rather than, you know, you mentioned before about writing or making music to a label.
Yep.
It's very restrictive.
Yep. Definitely.
You know, for example, one of my tracks that I recently finished, I sent it to the label and they've like chopped it down and changed it so much where I no longer like the track anymore.
Yeah.
I had to pull out so much out of it because I actually went into it going to make not a donkey sound, but going to make like a sort of Euro 90s sort of influence stuff, 909, 707 sort of sounds with arps and everything else like that, and then put this cheesy vocal over it. Yeah. But I fucking loved it, you know? And then they stripped away all of those vocals and everything. And I even got the vocals re-sung. It was actually an old track. On the Top of the World, this track he made a house track, and then they made Alex K made a remix of it. Okay. And then anyway, so I wanted to make that song again, but with today's sort of production value. Yeah. So I did that, and then I just kept on getting chipped away, and then I had to change this, and then near the end, like it's out. It's not out yet, but we're waiting to hold to release it until a bit closer to summer. Sure. So it'll become like a little bit of an anthem. Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's going to be an absolute banger. Yeah. But yeah, it's not the way it was when I first made it. Yeah, which I'll still play. Sure, the original version the way I wanted it.
That's the thing. You can always play the originals and stuff. And I would say, just like I said earlier, just because it doesn't get signed or whatever, doesn't mean it's no good.
Yeah, it doesn't mean shit.
And there's been so many tracks that haven't been signed that have just been bootlegs for years or whatever that suddenly get picked up. And they go wild. Yeah. So
I'd love to hear, because you mentioned you know, about the tangents that you go on and you park a track. Yeah. You know, being a producer myself and having names of tracks of V1, V2 and up to V73 and then just ASDAF and you're just done with a track. Like how many of those tracks could there be, like, I don't know, a factor B squared or something like that, where you can do like a back catalogue of the tracks that never were? Could you do it?
I reckon,
would you want to?
Well, I've actually thought about doing an album called The B-Sides. Yeah. And I actually think Lossley did like a B-Sides thing a while ago. But I think there's a lot. But however, I'm also of the opinion of just like, you know when a track is resonating with you and you know when a track just falls short. And I think one of the skills, or maybe one of the superpowers or secret powers you have as a producer, is knowing when something's going to be something and when something's not. And I think I've always been a pretty good judge of knowing that I've got finished tracks that, like, I've played loose, I've played my mates, or played, you know, other artists, or even in sets that I just have never ended up releasing, because I'm just like, I don't think that represents the best of what I want out of that track, and I think it could be done better. But if you get bogged down in it, it can drain you. You know, you go back in, and when you start having disdain for going back into a project, that's when you know it's time to move on. Yeah, you know, true. And when you finish, and that's why albums are so difficult, because you're going in and you're doing all these tracks, and they all have to fit, and they're all flowing. Like, these are all the tracks on this album are club length, but I actually remade them all for a second time in ambient form, so they would all mix into each other and stuff. And it's like, it's a huge body of work. But I'm going back into these tracks I wrote, 18 months ago, like 150 times, to tweak things, change things, all this stuff, and it becomes quite tedious. Yeah, but absolutely. Know, like I said, if that riff at the start gets the goosebumps going, know, fuck, all right, got to get up today and I've got to work today. Today's work. I've got to go in, I've got to chop that down, I've got to shorten this, I've got to bring all the things in. Produce, it's not producing, it's more the editing and more bring it all together. And that's a big part of it. Yeah. But I feel like, there's definitely a lot that haven't made the cut, but for good reason. And I'm pretty comfortable with that at this point.
Yeah. Do you want to share those on a USB or something?
I'll send you the project files. What door are you using?
I use the front door.
Yeah, good boy. All right, I'll send them over. I'll send them through the back for you.
Thanks, mate.
Well, I think on that note, we better let you get off to your show.
No worries, mate.
Can I just say, I think on behalf of us both, thank you very much for taking the time, for hanging out. I know you have a very busy schedule. It's been a pleasure catching up, mate.
My pleasure, guys. Obviously, we've known each other for a while, so I think we were planning to do this a little while ago, but didn't work out. But I think this is how the universe has worked in our favour. We've got some good stuff to talk about. We've got a good time to connect, and we've got a fun show to go to this afternoon and sink a couple of frothies on this beautiful sunny day.
100%.
Sounds good, mate. Thank you very much for coming out.
And for those of you out there, support the man. Check out his album, Bloom, CD, MP3 apparently.
Links will be in the description, by the way.
Grab a cracking vinyl and, mate, look forward to seeing you front and centre.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, gents.